Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you today about countering Noam Chomsky's view on the Korean War. Okay, I just watched a video of what he said about the Korean War. I gave it a fair assessment. All right, but we're going to talk about why I disagree with what he says. Okay, there were a lot of border skirmishes before the Korean War. And he does talk about that Stalin gave Kim Il-sung the green light to go invade South Korea. He gave the North Korean leader Kim Il-sung the green light to invade South Korea. Chomsky was right on that. But he did not go into detail and say that Kim Il-sung petitioned Joseph Stalin 7 times to do so. Also, before the invasion, Kim Il-sung got on the loudspeakers near the North-South Korean border, promised a lot of land reform in South Korea. And that was basically just done to soften up the South Korean civilian population, or get the South Korean civilian population to fight on North Korea's side. All right, and then also, and Chomsky makes no mention of that also. And the land reform speeches happened in May, the invasion happened in June. The land reform speeches happened in May of 1950. The invasion of South Korea began on June 25th in 1950. Okay. Also, he talks about the Soviet Union was very involved. Okay. First of all, a lot of those pilots that flew North Korean MiGs that were flown by Soviet pilots. The Soviets gave orders to the pilots that did not get shot down. They said, if your wingman or the guy flying next to you was shot down and parachuted out, shoot him out of the sky, and shoot him so bad that he's blown to pieces, that his body, that people on the ground cannot identify his body. That was done to hide the Soviets' involvement in the Korean War. And if they were captured, they were to lie and say they were white Chinese people. So if Soviet pilots got captured, they were to lie and be told they were white Chinese people. Okay. And a lot of this now, but in the early 1990s when Russia became an ally to the West, a lot of this was found in a lot of declassified Russian documents, as well as there's a book called Voices from the Korean War, where Korean War veterans speak about their experiences. I had personally read that book, and it was mentioned in there too. Chomsky makes no mention of that. Okay? Yes, after the war, Koreans ultimately wanted to be unified, but the Soviets did not fight Japan in World War II very much, only for just a little over 3 months. And the U.S. had to promise the Soviets the Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands just to get the Soviet Union in that war. Well, because the Soviets came from Manchuria, the Soviets naturally got to Korea first. The only thing the Americans could do at that time was say, we're taking control of South Korea, because the Soviets were not going to let the Americans have the entire peninsula, and had the Americans not done what they did, the entire Korean peninsula today would be under North Korean control and just under a totalitarian communist regime, because the Soviets were going to take over the whole country. They were going to put Kim Il-sung in power. Kim Il-sung trained at the Karbask Infantry Officers School before the Korean War. During World War II, he was largely in the Soviet Union. He wasn't in Korea. And the North Korean leader, at the time the Korean War happened, knew more Russian languages of the Russian language than he did of the Korean language. His Korean was not that good when he was appointed leader of North Korea. Also, the Soviet occupation of North Korea was a disaster. Soviets raped women at will. They just tortured the North Korean population, and it was so bad, as I've said before, that the North Korean citizen tried to kill Kim Il-sung with a grenade, because through all that, Kim Il-sung was still praising the Soviet soldiers, even during the horrible occupation. Chomsky makes no mention of that. He makes no mention of any of that, and he does talk about the bombing campaign of North Korea, where the U.S. bombed a lot of North Korean dams. Okay. First of all, those dams were supplying water to enemy soldiers, and under the rules of war, you can bomb those dams. Second of all, yes, the pilots did say we bombed those dams. And they said some things probably that they shouldn't have, but let me explain. Okay, a lot of those North Korean peasants were actually North Korean soldiers disguised as peasants. And a lot of North Koreans, as I've said before, a lot of North Korean soldiers disguised themselves as peasants or refugees and got really close to U.S. soldiers. And when they got close to U.S. soldiers, they shot and killed them. Or they blended in with the refugee population and then sometimes would use refugees as shields. They would sneak behind the refugees and shoot at the U.S. soldiers. And the U.S. soldiers were scared to shoot back, or they had to shoot back for self-defense. And that takes a lot of psychological toll on your brain. The U.S. soldiers probably thought most North Koreans they saw were actually soldiers disguised as peasants, because that happened a lot during the Korean War. Actually, the reason the Katyusha program started in the Korean War, Koreans' augmentation to the U.S. Army, was so the UN could separate who was really a true South Korean soldier and then who was North Koreans disguised as a South Korean soldier or a North Korean disguised as a peasant. That happened. Sometimes they would go as far as disguising themselves as women. James Brady noted that in his book Coldest Winter. James Brady was a Marine during the Korean War. Chomsky makes no mention of that. He doesn't make any mention of that. Okay? Chomsky does not make any mention of any of that. So, please do not take Chomsky's word as absolute when it comes to the Korean War, because the Soviets were involved. Yakov Malik was a Soviet representative to the UN at the time during the Korean War. Warren Austin was the U.S. representative to the UN. Warren Austin showed the UN General Assembly, or the UN Security Council, Soviet-made rifle. And he questioned the Soviet representative, Yakov Malik, about it. And Yakov Malik just walked out. The Soviets supplied North Korea a lot of their weapons. Yakov Malik, or a lot of Westerners call him Jacob Malik. Jacob Malik walked out. And a lot of that equipment was made in the USSR. And there's a lot of photos and archives that are not classified anymore, have never been classified, that show that. So, anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Take care, and God bless, and bye-bye. Bye-bye.